All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a little bit after 2:00, so we'll go ahead and get our meeting started. This is the Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting, and we do have an opening statement, correct?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Agana, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Before we begin, we are asking for everyone's undivided attention because, as always, there are those in the room who have attended these meetings and are up to date, and then there are those who have some information, but not all. For others, this may be their first meeting, and we need everyone to be focused and clear and know what is going on as we advance this struggle forward. Our objective is clear. We want access to the full funds that we need to ensure we can move into healthy houses of our choice. We thank everyone across the city of New Orleans and beyond who has and continues to support our fight as residents of Gordon Plaza. It is important that everyone know with no shadow of a doubt that our community, as residents of Gordon Plaza, have fought relentlessly to secure the allocation and approval of the $35 million that currently sits in Liberty Bank. We need to make it very clear that the $35 million did not come because we waited around for it. It did not come because of attorneys or the legal system. It did not come because of politicians who ignored us, made us promises, or told lies. It is as a result of our fight. We want to state this clearly because we have fought and will continue to fight whoever, however, each step of the way until this is fully resolved. For us, being fully resolved is when we, as residents of Gordon Plaza, are finally able to move off of the toxic landfill that we still live on today and are able to move into healthy homes of our choice. So today, we have some updates and also want to name some very important steps that still must be taken to move this forward. So here are the updates. As a result of our fight to secure an appraiser of our choice due to justifiable and historical evidence and concern regarding discriminatory practices and devaluation, that process is now moving forward. The appraiser of our choice, Chris Baker, is now in the process of working toward a completion deadline toward a 75-day timeline that started on February 6th. Therefore, while the appraisals are being worked on, we, as the residents of Gordon Plaza, are actively working on pinning down everything we need from you all, from the city of New Orleans, and those engaged in the transactional processes regarding the relocation costs associated with the actual moving process. These relocation costs, they include three things. 1, moving service. 2, temporary and transitional housing. 3, necessary relocation costs and fees. It's important that this process is attended to with great care to ensure we do not take on any additional and unnecessary burdens, physically mentally, or emotionally. We mean that with every bit of our demand, because this has been and still is a process that no community should have to endure. 12 residents of Garden Plaza have passed away just during this current administration alone. Under any other circumstances, premature mass death like this should be reason enough for everyone who has any role to play in moving this process forward to do so. Because we are prepared to fight for our lives and sound the alarm to the fullest for anyone who aimed to prey on us. And I did say pray, P-R-E-Y, and not pray, P-R-A-Y. Although this stage that we are currently in should be the smoothest part of this struggle, we will continue to be vigilant through every step of the process, because we have 41 years of justifiable reason to not simply trust anything that the city of New Orleans says. This is about our lives, and we would be fools to simply rely on words from the city of New Orleans and not see action. We have demonstrated our commitment to this with great consistency, and we fight every step of the way to ensure our needs are met. We maintain and expect a focus on ensuring non-discriminatory practices and non-devaluation in all aspects of this entire process, even with finalizing the details with the relocation costs. Actions and accountability for forward movement in ways that align with meeting our needs as the residents of Garden Plaza are the priority. So now, for the steps forward. In a moment, we will ask Angela to come up and walk through our list of concerns today, which consists of specifics regarding the 3 areas of focus we have for today. Picking up from the last Garden Plaza Task Force meeting, but before I do, I turn to the elders of my community to ask for permission as we continue as stated. Do I have your permission? Come on.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Monique. And we honor and recognize the residents of Gordon Plaza in these spaces. As she shared before, we understand that there's some people who may be in this meeting for the first time. And so we're asking folks to take into consideration the updates that were provided. And so we're grateful for that. As we move forward, we just want to name that there's some things that happened since the last Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting. And I just want to name a few of these things out loud for the Gordon Plaza Task Force, and also ensuring that we're in alignment with what the community has wanted to have shared for all. Since the last Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting, 2 things have transpired, even during the time where people were in full-blown activities around Mardi Gras season. And the residents wanted that work to continue even during Mardi Gras season, because this doesn't take a break from Mardi Gras either. And so on the 14th, which was Valentine's Day for some, we came up here and the board sent representation to meet with those who could be present to talk about the next steps that Helena Moreno said that she would take responsibility for in terms of some steps. So we want to talk through those. JP Morale was also present for that meeting. And I am going to ask that if you have his contact information, we prepare to contact him if we have a question attached to something that he is to report back on today. In addition to that, we had an opportunity to meet with the folks from TCA. We're very grateful to see their presence in the room. It feels really important to know and understand that there's going to be work that has to happen in between these meetings to keep these efforts going forward. So we're not going to burn up a lot of time in here today around those things. We don't even really want to be here long. But the things that we do need to attend to need great care and great attention. And so we're asking people to please listen carefully, please focus in with us so that we can address these and keep moving. So in the spirit of moving this process forward, we actually want to start with just naming what has transpired around the step-by-step. So I'm going to turn this over to Helena Moreno to report back your findings, and then we're going to follow up with questions.
All right, thank you, Angela. As I mentioned during the last task force meeting, what was really important to all of us is really to understand the step-by-step process on what it's going to take for the sale to go through of a Gordon Plaza home to the city of New Orleans. And so I promised that I would come back with kind of a one-pager, easy explanation as to all the different steps. We went through a series of kind of back and forth emails between my office and the city attorney's office, getting information from everybody from the Department of Finance. I appreciate the CAO also helping to pull answers together. But what we do finally have is really a simple step-by-step process as to what it's going to take from the time you get your offer letter to what to expect all the way to your closing date. And there's really only 5 bullet points, so I can go ahead and read those. And just so everyone's aware, this is really kind of a cut and paste of a lot of different information that I had already sent to you, but I just wanted to put it all together into one page. All right, so the process for sale of Gordon Plaza homes to the city of New Orleans. First, Sheriff Butler will extend the purchase offer on behalf of the city, and that'll come to you all via letter. What we did was we took a look at the most recent letter sent out to make sure that that letter looked, very similar to the one that Ms. Sheehan has received previously. You all remember that was like the sample property that where the appraisal was done. And at least in a quick review that I did, they did look very similar. Number 2, if the seller does accept that offer, the seller then contacts Bayou Title. The contact information to Bayou Title is listed in the offer letter. So you don't have to go around and try to figure out who you're going to contact. It's already in the offer letter. Bayou Title will then prepare the purchase agreement and will forward to the seller. And my understanding from talking to the city attorney is that Bayou Title says that this preparation will begin immediately of the purchase agreement. Number 4, Bayou Title will then contact Norman White. That's the contact with the city's finance department when there is a signed purchase agreement. The money will then be moved within 24 hours upon receipt of a signed purchase agreement. And once again, the finance department, meaning Norman White, will be handling this. The finance department is responsible for transferring the agreed upon purchase proceeds and associated costs, if any, from Liberty Bank to Bayou Title's trust account at least 3 days prior to a scheduled closing. That 3-day period is important because this is to ensure that everything's like clearing the bank. And so that's why there's that 3-day window. And then the final piece is that, and this is coming from the city attorney, the city is paying all ordinary seller closing costs, but says closing costs do not include taxes and/or liens. That is the seller's responsibility. And so those are the pieces that we were able to put together from kind of the back and forth emails to put it into one page. Any additional questions that you all may have today? Once again, I'm happy to keep kind of working through and getting those answered if there are any follow-up questions to this. And also, if you don't happen to have them right now, but want to send them to me later, obviously that's fine too.
What we'll do, thank you for that. What we'll do is name a few of the questions that we have currently.
Sure.
And then once the residents have an opportunity to kind of go back over and review what you've presented today, if there are any additional questions, then we'll send those over because we do want the city of New Orleans to know those questions in advance. Our appreciation for having these documents in draft form is really embedded in the spirit of wanting to move this forward so that if we can catch a question or concern in advance, then it means that 67 different property owners have the opportunity to communicate whatever within that amount of time turnaround so that we can keep moving this effort forward. And so a couple of questions that we do have just in terms of this process is knowing that when it comes to the 3-day turnaround that has to do with finance and Norman White, making sure that the funds have been transferred as needed and cleared. We just want to understand if there's anything else or anyone else besides Norman White who's a part of this process between Bayou Title and Norman White before it gets to the residents. We just want to be clear about that because we want to be under no illusion about timeframes. Because right now, if we just look at this, we're talking about anywhere between 3 and potentially 5 days maximum just for the process to be turned around. But that does not mean that it cares for any other people involved, and we would just like to know who those people are. We feel that that's very important to name today, because if there are other people, it's helpful that we know who those people are. That way we're not looking up later and then having to put Norman White in a situation where then he is turning and saying, I'm waiting on somebody else. Whoever the somebody else's are, we would like to know who those people are in advance. One other request that we've made is that when it comes to the purchase agreement, and there was already a verbal agreement around this, but we just want to ensure that we follow up so that this can be added to the steps that there was an agreement that any purchase agreement documents in draft form would be submitted over to the residents already. We have, I want to name the blank general forms, but if there are some things that have changed between now and then, we're asking for that. So this is no different than the request around the actual offer letter, because you all were able to send over an offer letter. So we already have seen the one that Machina received, but we just want to make sure that if there's anything that's different, and clearly there's some things different because we can even see that the dollar amounts in the draft form looks different. So clearly we understand that. We also want to just name too, that we understand that at the point at which the residents establish a meeting that is going forward for closing, we just want to know if there are any other expectations that are on the side of the city of New Orleans prior to Bayou Title picking up from where they left off. We already know Bayou Title's process that they have outlined, but we just want to be clear about this point where it says from Liberty Bank to Bayou Title's trust account at least 3 days prior to. After the 3 days, what happens next? Is it Bayou Title reaching out again to the residents to set up a meeting to come in? Like, what happens there? We see money gets transferred and we see no other exchanges after that.
Just writing it down. I got you.
So we just want to name those. And again, once again, in the spirit of moving this forward, the more we can pin down now, the better it is. And we also just want to go on record as saying today out loud, in the name of transparency, the same thing we said in the meeting on March 14th, which is we want to make sure that this process is as seamless as possible for the residents of Gordon Plaza, no unnecessary barriers, and that the residents are not being treated like vendors, because we've already bared witness to that being a tumultuous process for people. And this is just a simple exchange that should be going forward. So that's that on that part. We're ready to move to the next step if we're okay with that. Did you have any other questions?
No, I'm good. I just want to make sure, I'm just going to repeat back just so that I make sure that I understand as I follow up with these questions. So first, it's as far as, and I've asked this question many times, but I will keep, trying to hone in. aside from Norman White, who else is going to be responsible for kind of the moving of the money and the transaction within the city? And if there's anything more to that process
Yes.
that what has already been, sent our way. And I've asked that several times and I keep getting just very simple responses back, but I'm going to try to keep digging in and see if I can get.
Maybe ask when you say you get simple responses back, like what kind of responses are you receiving?
Well, when I ask like, what is the process? It'll just be like, just the one line of, the money will be moved within 24 hours, but not
Mhm.
necessarily like explaining the different steps that it'll take to necessarily move the money 24 hours, or if it's just Norman doing all of the phone calls and everything like that. So I'm going to keep pressing to see if I can get even just a little bit more detail so that we're all super clear.
Thank you for that. I think what would help lessen anxiety within the community is that we know a name, we know a department, and if a signature is required, whose signature?
Yeah, that's a good point. Mhm. All right. Then we have, on the second question, the forms. You all have received the standard real estate forms, but are there any other type of documents, anything else like that, that you all need to be, familiar with to provide those forms to you?
Yes.
Got it. And then the last piece, is,
I want to name the why behind that so that people are clear. The reason is because we understand that from the time the residents receive a purchase agreement material, they have the right to and need to read through those documents and feel comfortable.
yeah, no,
So if we can already see them in draft form, then all they would ever be looking for is if there's anything different about them.
Yeah.
So that can expedite that process as well.
yeah, no doubt. And no surprises either. That makes sense. And then the last question is really about, once, the city's done everything and the money has been put into, the account, and Bayou Title now has access to those funds, what happens next as far as potential notification of, the seller, like what steps happen once now Bayou Title has access to the funds to pay the seller? Is that correct?
Correct.
Got it.
And it'll be helpful too, if there's same way that was done before, proactive outreach to Bayou Title in terms of what that turnaround is for them, right? Because once they get the information that the money's been transferred and they're engaging, we just don't want to have an expectation that we believe is the city's expectation if it's Bayou Title's responsibility.
I got it. Okay. Councilmember Thomas.
No, just I think Ms. Kennard's first position on the process, especially in who's involved, needs to be narrowed down. As someone who worked in professional services before I got on the city council, something could be approved, the payment could be approved, and it'd be rerouted through brass, where several people would have to touch it, or several people would have to look at it, even though if a company was due payment. So I would hope at some point that it's given to you guys in writing who is ultimately responsible.
That's what we're asking for. We have this process has been named in writing, but we need these names attached to
Because
it.
the vending process, if someone could be due their payment for 5-6 months or more. So I think, especially now that we're moving to a conclusion, I think it's important that that process be narrowed so it's not treated like vending. Maybe an emergency, some type of emergency declaration. I don't know, Mr. Montano, if that would fit, but
They're not being treated as vendors. And so
Okay.
that's why, the process is much, much shortened.
okay.
And so that piece, has been named. We've talked about this. That was a concern, that if there would be, treated as vendors, put into brass, like we've gone over methodically over that, not being treated as vendors. And that's why we can move on this
Thank you.
much faster.
Okay, so we're gonna move on and we're gonna, the residents are asking for folks to speak directly into the mic so everybody can hear. Okay, so on to the next thing. And I'm just gonna name these things. This doesn't require, anything extra from TCA right now, but I want to say again, thank you for being here, because it helps keep all of the context and information, keeping us all on the same page. Again, we want to make sure that this process is moving forward as seamlessly as possible with the least amount of red tape, unnecessary obstacle, problem. So let me just name some things so that everybody's on the same page here. Number one, we're making a clear distinction between two things. The first part is the understanding that TCA is stepping in regards to supporting the process for the moving services. That is separate and apart from the efforts around the temporary housing and the renters. And so we want to name that so that we're treating them as two separate things so that there's no confusion in regards to that. We understand already that the draft agreement for the moving expenses, the services around the moving company had already been shared with TCA. So we had an opportunity in the last meeting where we were together with TCA to walk through the components of that agreement to make sure that there were no questions or concerns, and there were some questions. So we're just going to name a few of those things, but we want to name out loud that we understand that all of the moving companies or services involved would be official, legitimate companies that are registered with the state of Louisiana, bonded and insured. And so TCA has been willing and agreed to drafting up a list of moving companies in advance. The why behind it is so that they're not caught in a place in the last minute trying to navigate how people accept payment, all those things. They have agreed to share a draft list so that the residents can examine that list and also say, hey, I was already starting to look for a moving company. I think I have one. Can we add this to the list? So that way there's not any confusion. The residents' input have been taken into consideration for that list. That may also help out TCA because it can give them maybe 5 or 6 more options. And we don't want to have a lot of unnecessary competition between those particular moving companies if we're having multiple people who are reserving a moving company at the same time. So those things in between will help generate an overall list that the residents can select from. And we know that anybody who's on that list is already in order with TCA. So when it's time for payments to be made, those things can be made directly and people are not trying to figure that out at the last minute. So they have agreed to that. We also understand that there are some blanks that are in the cooperative endeavor agreement. And so those things we are going to loop back because we understand that there's some additional conversation that has to be had with JP Morrell, which is also going to require the support we know of the city of New Orleans as a whole. And so we want to do that and have that conversation in this space. And so we just want to name that we're looking for him to be present in the space, and we will come find him in advance to ensure that he understands that. We also want to name that TCA, as it relates to being able to engage around the temporary housing and rental agreement component, that they do not have, unless something has happened in the last 24 hours that we're not aware of, they don't have the actual draft agreement from the city of New Orleans yet. We need that. So what I'm just going to name here that they have done, thank you for taking initiative, is that they have provided us the equivalent of what they're going to provide us for the moving expenses, which is the skeleton outline. They're going to give us a skeletal outline of the process in terms of the call and the exchange there with the moving services, but they've already given us a skeleton outline of how they engage in their procedures thus far. The thing that we want to name so nobody on the committee, the task force is confused, nobody in the community is confused, is that we are all very clear that there are some nuances to the residents of Gordon Plaza that are not identical or the same to the current work that TCA may be doing. So through that conversation of the document, we can caress out what we need to make sure that the residents are not necessarily being treated like a previous program, but is speaking to their program, taking into consideration the expertise, knowledge, and experience that TCA already has, because there are going to be some things that just don't apply to this situation. So we're going to name those things. And what we would like to do is then be able to bring that draft and also talk through it with the entire task force as well to keep everybody on the same page. So we will continue those conversations so we can keep that moving forward. But I'm naming that TCA can only do so much in that regard when it comes to that without the draft agreement. We are also aware that there was a call from Ms. Sharon Robles to TCA. So we just wanted to inquire about that call. Do you have any information you wanted to share today? Because to be honest with you, Ms. Robles, we didn't even know you were engaged in a conversation.
You can come up to the table or to the mic with Angela, whatever you'd like.
Is this on? Okay. Yeah, actually I made a couple of phone calls. In one of our conversations to TCA, they let me know that they had additional questions. And so I was asking what those questions were. And they said they would send me the list of questions. And so now I have them and we have responses.
Okay, so just to be clear, and this is to be helpful in the spirit of moving things forward. We also want to make sure that we're clear-minded about any of those kinds of exchanges, because it's helpful to us to know if there's something that we need to take into consideration, considering the fact that they've received no draft agreement yet. So TCA, you received some questions. Did you get your questions answered? You did get them answered today? Okay, so the question that we have is, when will we have a draft agreement?
So the process to do the CEA, it's like another contract with the city. And one of the things we provided today was an estimate for what the total would be for. So now that I have that answer, I'm routing the paperwork to move that contract forward.
Okay, and is that specific to the temporary housing? Because remember, I'm naming for
This is
our,
specific to moving.
hold on, because one of the things that happened last time, and this is not about you specifically, is that we don't get to finish the question before we're already getting a response. So I'm trying to help out with that. Yeah, and if you don't mind, Ms. Robles, speaking into my, so are you speaking specifically to the moving expenses agreement? Or are you speaking about temporary housing agreement?
This is related to the moving expenses.
Okay.
And that's one thing I clarified in that email response, is that there's going to be two separate CEAs, one for the moving expenses, because that comes out of a specific funding. And then there would be a separate one for the temporary expenses. And those details are still being worked out. So the first CEA can move forward. I got guidance on it a couple hours ago. So I'm moving forward on that.
Okay, thank you for that. And who are you receiving guidance from?
I asked Joe
From Joseph Threat? From Joseph Threat? Okay. Yes, is that Joseph? Okay, I don't want to be naming it. Okay, so just to be clear then, the components of that means that the cooperative endeavor agreement has been updated or will be updated.
Well, yes, it will be updated. There's a couple of things that have to happen first. First, the money has to be set aside before the contract gets updated. So the first step to do that's happening. There's let's say there's 20 steps, we're on step 2, but that's what we needed to move it forward.
Okay, and so 2 quick questions just to help move this process forward is, if there are components that are being added to this based on amounts or those kind of things, the residents are going to want to see a draft of that as well, because what we're trying to calculate in our mind is how a determination for the amount gets established without, is it inclusive of up to the 67 properties? How did you determine a number around that?
So there's a handful of online calculators that will help you create an estimate for yourself of how much it would cost to move. So I made some assumptions on a 3-bedroom house being moved with a family room, a living room, and a kitchen. I assumed that because
Can you speak into the mic? I'm sorry.
Yes, I assumed that there would be like a larger bed in 2 of the rooms, dressers, nightstands.
Okay, so
assumptions on how much stuff would need to be moved.
Okay, here's what we would like to ask. We'd like to ask if that guesstimate that you've made, if that can be emailed over, sent over to the residents. Ms. French, if you can send that over to us, please, because I just want to name, and this is to be helpful in the spirit of moving things forward. When these kind of processes happen, it minimizes confusion when the residents can offer information to prevent anybody guesstimating, because they already know their needs, and we can actually help you, because it would be hugely concerning to us if the numbers that are provided don't match what it is that they need. And so we just want to be clear so that we don't have those hiccups.
Right. And just so you're aware, like an estimate needs to be made so that we can even move forward.
No, we understand. No, we totally understand. we understand and appreciate that. All we're saying is that from the discussion that was had in that last meeting, we just wanted to make sure that the residents were involved in that, because the estimate is something they should be aware of. Right now, if just to help out, and this is all about the spirit of moving things forward, so bear with me, because this is where things get shaky. This is where things get off track, and this is where the resistance starts up again. Because we're trying to prevent unnecessary antagonism. What we're saying, and I want to be super clear and logical about this so people understand, so we can prevent these things, is that we just got through saying that TCA is putting together a list of moving companies. The residents are looking at moving companies. And so we need to already be proactively naming what those things are, so that the residents don't find that, oh, they're looking at a company that might be charging $2,000 for their move, and the estimate said something like $500. We don't know those things, and we want to be on the same page in advance. So if we can just see the draft, that would eliminate that part. We could actually just keep it moving forward.
Okay.
Okay. So help us to understand just one more time, if I can be clear. And I'm asking, because you hear the residents behind, how did this step come in? And we're asking out of understanding, Ms. Robles, because we saw you sit in a meeting here and heard you say that you were reassigned to a different department and that you only had one project you were working on, and Gordon Plaza was not the project you named. So we're just trying to understand. It's on the public record, and we can bring it up. We just want to be clear, because we've seen you sit in the meetings, but we just want to know who's playing what roles. That's why we're asking departments, names, and all these things, so we can stay on top of it in advance of it. And I promise you, I'm giving the clearest, calmest response I can, because they're asking these things. So if you could just answer that for us.
I'm sorry, can you clarify which question you're asking?
I'm gonna say it like Derek said, where did you come from in the mix right here? We're trying to understand that part.
Where did I come from? I mean,
No, in this part, because you indicated, we're pausing, we indicated that you were not working, you said that you were not working on any other projects besides one, and it was not Gordon Plaza.
okay, so I'm not sure what context you're referring to. I'm working on, like, you want to know how many projects I'm working on?
No. Let me just ask these three questions clearly. Remind us of your role and what department you work in and what's your position.
I work
Right there.
the Office of Resilience and Sustainability.
So one more time,
The Office of
I can't hear it.
Resilience and Sustainability.
Okay, that's a different department than the one you worked at prior to.
Correct.
Mhm. And what is your role as it relates to this component?
I'm still the project manager.
Okay, we didn't know you were still the project manager, because I don't remember the last time there's been any engagement or communication with you. Just we're honoring this in the name of transparency, because that's a big part, and we can't just jump over that and pretend like all of a sudden you're the project manager. So if you are the project manager, there should be some communication, and we didn't know you were the project manager, because I'm going to say again, and the residents here to bear witness, we were here for another presentation on another day in a committee meeting, and you stated that you are only working on one project because you were reassigned
Maybe I
to
could
this
jump-
role.
I think you're gonna,
maybe I could jump in and Joe, you can help me out. I think when she says project manager, she's working on the Ag Street Solar project. So
Okay,
does not have to do with the relocation, does not have to do with the other pieces we're talking about, the actual solar project
Yes.
that was designed for. Joe, if you want to help, and I think there's unnecessary confusion arise.
there is confusion. I want to eliminate the
We can
confusion.
just try to clarify that quickly so that we can keep moving.
Mhm.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sharon Robles works in the Office of Resilience and Sustainability.
Mhm.
She's one of my project managers. One of the projects that she has is Ag Street Solar. Part of Ag Street Solar, where we moved to $35 million of bond, includes the acquisition of Gordon Plaza.
Mhm.
She is the project manager
Mhm.
for this.
Well, I'm just naming for you, Joe. that we're just caught off guard because
Right.
we were initially under the impression she was the project manager
Right.
until we heard her say.
No, I moved her from Department of Public Works
Okay,
to the Office of Resilience, so her sole intent
okay,
would be to manage this project until completion.
okay. So here's the thing. Can you name for us, as it relates to this component right here, what is it that Ms. Sharon Robles would actually be doing? Help us to understand. Is it this one thing? What would she be doing? Because we don't have an answer to that.
In the project management, just like for TCA, she will be the project manager to help the conduit to move the CEA forward and to do the requisitions and the funding documents to make that happen. Today, I authorized the requisition from the estimate for the funding document for the TCA moving. That's what we approved today. Now, that could be amended at any time. So,
I'd like to ask you to amend that.
right. And she will get back once you look at the estimate to see if that's fair.
Yes, the reason we're asking about amending in terms of this process. That's what we're talking about amending.
Okay.
I want to thank you again for being here. We're gonna work through this. Stick with us.
No, we'll work through this.
We're
I
working
want
through
to
it.
see it
So
to completion, and Sharon's been here from the beginning because it made no sense, and I know how people have feelings, but it made no sense to change out the project manager. She's gonna be here through the onset until we acquire the properties, and then she'll move into development of the solar farm.
Okay, so let me name a couple of things, Mr. Thread. I'm conscious because I'm hearing all the comments. So let me get it out. Is that as it relates to this process, in the spirit of moving it forward, where all of the concerns and confusions happen is when communications transpire in between and we're unaware of them because it causes confusion. And I'm not talking about confusion like we just been out of shape about Sharon Robles just because. We are naming that Sharon Robles was named as the project manager before, and there were problematic activity, whether it was from her or from whoever was directing her or whoever was guiding her. And she understands that there were, okay? We're naming again that maybe, I want to say a year has gone by. I don't know, maybe a year and a half. I don't know how long has gone by that there's been no engagement with Sharon Robles. So in the spirit of moving forward, if you are the person who is providing guidance to her as it relates to this, then we need that communication to come from you because we need another level of accountability. So whatever it is that you might be requesting support from Sharon Robles on, we need you to be the person who sends it over so that we're clear that it's coming from you and your guidance.
Okay, I know.
Because if Sharon Robles has to do this alone, unfortunately, we're trying to prevent the ball from being dropped on any level.
I agree with you, and I think what the difficulty was, Sharon has always been the project manager, but what happened, if you remember, Angela, before we had a window where we were just in a legal law type discussions in the task force where her involvement was not required at that time. Now that we're moving forward with all these processes, I've got to get her engaged.
Okay, I'm gonna name again, Mr. Threat, that you might need the assistance of Sharon Robles, and we understand that we cannot prevent you from tapping into any support you need to get a job done. But what we are asking for, just to streamline the communication and the consistency, is that at the point at which you say to Sharon Robles, Sharon call so-and-so, Sharon send so-and-so, that the information come from you to the residents. You're on all those emails, Sharon is not. And so that was a surprise to us. And this is what happens when the residents get surprises.
Okay,
This is exactly what happens. And this is on the list of the things to bring up today.
well, I'll take responsibility, make sure that
Please and thank you.
everybody's in.
We will be engaging with you on this process. So if you're advising her to make calls or to engage with the agreements or whatever, it's got to come through you, from you, so that we don't have to ask again. See See, this is where it comes in.
Just to jump in, I think it's just a placeholder. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about.
I'm
The
saying,
estimate that she put in, everyone don't get too wrapped up on what the estimate says or what it came in. It was a placeholder so we can keep the process moving.
okay, and let me
I think
just
what
name
was committed
this.
keep moving process.
That's behind me. I want to name this. Well, we're not gonna speak for Lincoln Beach either. We're not gonna do that. What I'm gonna say is that, thank you, CEO, for naming that, placeholder. But what we heard her say today is that the process cannot move forward without the amount that she has calculated in her head. And so we need to remove that barrier, because what we're saying is anything that comes needs to involve the input of the residents, not because of any other reason, that we understand that the residents will name the things to keep it moving forward. Yes, yes. 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 So, Mr. Thread, what we're asking you for is to help mitigate the concerns, because they are deep concerns. And so even though that there was that period of time where we were battling some other antagonisms, we are not trying to get to this step and create new antagonisms. Please, sir, please.
No, I mean, we're moving forward. I mean, with that rec today that I initiated is just a placeholder, like the CL said, a placeholder to start the process moving. I mean, we want to be able to provide the TCA funds. I know the CFO's office wants to be able to provide a timely transfer of funds once the title documents come to us.
Yeah.
So we're working toward completion of all of this.
So then if you could just send over that, the draft agreement, we can move forward from there. Okay. Okay, in the spirit of moving this forward.
Go ahead, Ms. French.
I want to just say this for clarity. We could not move forward with going back to our board without a value in the CEA.
Right.
In order to have some starting value, and it's what Joseph has said, they had to have an estimate calculation. We cannot sign a blank CEA.
Mhm.
As long as everybody's agreeable, it's an estimate to start from.
Mhm.
And when we get the vendor list in, if those funds are not enough to make it work,
Can you speak into the mic?
if those funds are not enough to make it feasible to make the moves, we will come back, because the CA says that, to the city and identify from this vendor list, these are the average costs
Yeah.
per apartment. The then can be amended, but without a starting point, we can't go anywhere.
Ms. French, would it be helpful or Mr. Threat to reach out to some of these vendors now?
We have already started.
So you've already
And I was
started?
aware of that.
If I can just ask us to pause for a second. Thank you, Ms. French, for that, because we had already discussed what you just said at the meeting. What we are naming is something separate and apart from that, which is that in order for all these things to transpire, we want to make sure that the residents are clear about them. See, it is important to the residents to have that level of transparency, because when those decisions are just quickly made and quick exchanges happen, we are naming for the last 2.5 years. Those are always the points at which hiccups, confusion, and anxiety rises. So we are naming in advance that we are clear-minded that a dollar amount had to be established to move this forward. What we're saying is we were not clear about how the dollar amount got established without the residents being a part of that conversation, because remember, TCA is looking at companies and so are they. So it makes no sense for people to be unaligned on that. The assumption about how many rooms and how big the space is, whatever, the residents know where they are, but they also know what they're aspiring toward. And it's very important that that be taken into consideration. So long story short, we're grateful that the draft will be sent over, and we're grateful that the information will be coming from you, Mr. Threat.
And we'll send over the estimate calculation and the number that went into the CEA.
Thank you.
Not a solid number. It can be changed at any time. We can amend that.
It's the only reason we've asked for things to be in draft form. And we are not the ones that want to slow down this process. We want to expedite it, but we also said again, and I want to name this out loud again, because each time we get new people in the meeting, we have to be clear, is that while the residents don't want unnecessary delay, they also don't want to be dragged through some foolishness that they had nothing to do with. That's what this whole process is about. The residents being dragged through a process that is not their fault because other people from the city of New Orleans have made decisions on their behalf.
Angela, what do you?
So we want to keep moving.
What do you think would be the best way for the residents to be able to communicate their needs to Mr. Threat? Do you think it's via a letter? Do you recommend a meeting? Like we did a little behind the scenes meeting, a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was very productive. Like, what are your thoughts on how they can?
What I'll do, I'm gonna just say we've named the things out loud right now. We just stated them. But what we will do is we will follow up with the residents afterwards and extend an invitation of a conversation with you, Mr. Threat, just to make sure we firm it down, because really we don't want confusion with anybody. We want to keep it moving forward, and we're telling you in advance this will help move it forward.
What I can do, Councilmember Moreno, I'll just be point of contact for the city. And
Thank
I'll, with Gilbert's approval, I'll just collect all of our tasks moving forward. I'll report back to you and whoever the point of contact is with Gordon Plaza residents. And that way I'll just keep everybody up and informed. I'll take responsibility for that.
Thank you, Mr. Threat.
Thank you for that. Okay. So we're ready to move on to the next thing. And you can stay there, Mr. Threat. So just very quickly, we understand now, so I'm gonna update my update. New information, thank you. That the moving expenses cooperative endeavor agreement now is going to be updated with this new information, still in draft form, sent over so the residents can review. In addition to that, we understand that we need to see the draft agreement pertaining to the temporary housing and the rental component. That part has still not been seen by anybody that we are aware of. So that's two separate things, Mr. Joseph Threat, with two separate dollar amounts attached to them because they're two separate things, right? And we're also naming, again, once again, the why is important, that we're being so intentional about this, and we don't want to be reckless. We don't want to be haphazard, and we don't want to be negligent, is because we also want to make sure that as we move into the temporary housing piece, we have to care for those who are owner occupied and going to need temporary housing and those who are renters. So in that conversation, clearly, you're going to need to know how many people we're talking about, right? And that information is going to come from the residents. So when that follow-up conversation happens, that informs that. And so we want to just be able to name it, because we don't want anybody to be in a place having to try to guesstimate what these things are without meeting the need. Truth be told, rather than people trying to discriminate or devalue the residents, that's how you save the city of New Orleans money. You meet people's needs and you cut out all the other foolishness. That's how we save the city money, if we really are so concerned about saving the city money. So let us keep moving forward. We also just want to name that we understand that once these two things are addressed, then we've got to loop back on two things that we surfaced up before, which we know are the relocation costs that are attached to people's boxes, all those other kind of things, and the lump sum that they would need attached to that. And we also know that we need to ask you today about any update pertaining to those predatory fees, and that's what we call them because that's what they are, attached to folks who might have taxes. And I know that Norman White was very inundated during the collection of taxes for people's properties. So we want to resurface that and see if there are any updates about that.
Right after our last meeting, I did, send the list of all the residents' addresses over to Norman White that went to, Treasury
Mhm.
to do the research for, taxes, penalties, and or interest. I had conversations with, Norman White about the possibility to waive taxes and or penalties and interest. I sent emails to himself and the law department. Law department had a problem with waiving taxes. But I think that the penalties and interest, as I understand it, Gilbert, might be a city policy that could be possible.
Okay, so in the last meeting, you shared that with us. And what you indicated after that, in that meeting is that the Treasury would be getting back to you about how much more time they need. So do you know how much more time they need to?
I have not heard back from
Okay,
Treasury yet.
so can we get? Yeah, because that is gonna help residents accordingly. And we just want to name once again, I want to bring this back full circle for Helena Moreno, is that embedded in that process connected with title loops back to this. Because what we asked for was that once this piece is addressed, that Norman's the finance office or whoever is going to do that, and we're still waiting to hear who's going to do that, provides the residents a copy of clearance around those fees, and also can proactively send those over to Bayou Title, because we want to make sure that that's not even a conversation that the residents have to entertain at that point. But if they can have their own copy, they can also bring it out at the time and help move that process forward as well. So we're looping back on that again, because we understand that that's going to help out the residents, going to help out Bayou Title, and it's going to help out the city. Okay. I want to just indicate, well, I'm gonna pause for a second because we've hit items on this list, and I just want to look back and make sure that things have been covered. Okay. One of the things that we're concerned about, and we understand that Mardi Gras is a thing. But now that we're on the other side of it, and I want to thank again TCA for being willing to meet during Mardi Gras season, and thank the council people who are present for meeting during Mardi Gras season. And so what we're asking for now is that we could proactively look ahead at the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting, because we want to make sure that we can expedite this. And this is what we mean also when we say we need things to be attended to in between the meetings. And we have the evidence that there's business still going on even during Mardi Gras season. People are handling stuff, negotiating things, working things out. And we don't want the residents of Gordon Plaza to get behind further, because now we're just picking up. So can we look toward March 2nd? I'm just starting with that date because I had to scan the board members. Also about seeing if we can get an evening time so that residents can be
Yeah,
present. It's hard sometimes.
That day, I don't think it's going to work because we have a special council meeting dealing with short-term rentals, which is going to be very lengthy.
Okay, do you have another time that week?
Let's see. What days is the Chamber open that week?
March 3rd?
We could, on the 3rd, we could do 2 to 3 p.m., but we need to be out of here by 3 for Ethics Review Board to start. What do we have on the 6th? BZA all day, okay. The afternoon on the 7th is available.
The afternoon on the 7th.
Open all afternoon. So you could tell me what time works for you all.
Just to do one more quick check.
Sure.
What openings do you have the week before that? Just doing one more check in there.
I think criminal justice is on the 7th in the morning, right? Angela, I'm sorry, repeat yourself. Sorry.
The question came up about, can you go back and look at the week before the 7th to see what those openings were that you have? Think there was
The
one-
only opening for the chamber is going to be between 2 and 3 on Friday, the 3rd of March.
What? Yeah. Um. What's the time frame again for the 7th? The 7th.
The CAO is free anytime on the 7th from 3 to 5. And I can.
Anytime between 3 and 5. That's still an hour if you're fine with that. Okay, so let's go for March 7th at 3 p.m.
That works? That works for you, Mr. Threat?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we'll send,
Mr. Montano, you said yes.
and Mr. Montano said yes. Ms. French, do you think you can come back then? Is that okay? Just in case we have some additional questions. And I'll send the notice, or Andrew will send the notice to Councilmember Morel's office too, to see if he can make it then.
Can we also, just really quickly, can we schedule a time to meet with Mr. Threat?
Mr. Threat, does that work for you?
Yes, yes, I'm fine.
The sooner the better.
Oh, 7 to 3. Yeah, that's how you're gonna.
Do you have time, Mr. Threat, on March 1st after 4 o'clock?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yes. Do you have a conference room here?
Yes, I do.
So 4 p.m., March 1st, meeting with at 4 p.m. And you will let us know the conference room?
Yeah, we'll just do 6E 15, 6th floor, City Hall, Capital Project Conference Room.
Okay. So the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting will be March 7th at 3 p.m. And the follow-up of Mr. Throw will be March 1st at 4 p.m. Yes.
All right. So the next task force meeting will be on the 7th at 3 p.m. We have several different action items, and that we'll send a quick recap too, if you don't mind, just after
Yes.
this meeting,
Mhm.
just so that we're all kind of staying on the same page and keep everybody updated along the way as we've been doing. And I'll see everybody back in person here on 7th.
Mhm.
Okay.
Angela, one last thing, for Gordon Plaza residents, when I respond in my emails, I know I'll send a copy to CAO Montano
Mhm.
and Councilmember Moreno. Who is the POC for Gordon Plaza?
It goes to the board, so if you can add Miss Shannon Rainey and Miss Marilyn Amar.
And if you need any of the emails, Joe, I can send them your way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Andrew.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.